Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be connecting a Xamarin application to our identity server. Now a big warning before you start this video, I'm not a Xamarin developer. I'm going to be copying most of the code from the internet, and this is more about the process of trying to find an OpenID Connect client for your technology stack and seeing what things you need to change in order to connect it to your identity server, and a little bit about how to set that up for your development environment. Again, I'm going to repeat myself, I'm not a Xamarin developer, so most of the stuff I don't actually know what I'm doing in the Xamarin world, as well as the Android development environment. And you're probably going to hear me say some assumptions that I have. Feel free to correct me if you know what those things are. But yeah, other than that, let's go ahead and start it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and add a new project. And by the way, I'm also assuming you have a little bit more experience in Xamarin than I do, and you already have your development environment set up. You have your Android SDKs and whatnot already installed, right? So let's go ahead and search for Android. I'm not going to do the OIS app. I am not picking this project. I'm rather going to pick the Xamarin Forms project, just because when I picked this project, the previewer seems to be bugged for me. I don't know what's wrong with that, and I'm not interested enough to fix it. Okay, so I'm just going to pick this. I'm going to call it Xamarin app. Let's go ahead and get started. So here I have my Xamarin app created, right? I get two projects. One Xamarin app is like the core project, is like kind of shared libraries kind of thing between your Xamarin app Android and the other two options that it provides, like UWP or iOS, but it doesn't really matter that much. So primary thing, same as with the WPF client or the JavaScript client or the MVC client, what you want to do is you want to find an OpenID Connect client. Okay, so this is what you do. You go ahead, open up your browser of choice, and you're going to use your search engine of choice. I use DuckDuckGo because that's like hard mode, right? So it makes me think a little bit, just that much about structuring my questions and what I'm learning. Not really, I'm just a hipster. I don't want to be spied on. And what you search for is Xamarin OIDC client. Okay, and there it is. There are a couple of links here. The primary, it was basically at this point, it's kind of like research, right? So you're just trying to find what works. You click on a bunch of things, and it doesn't take long to find this OIDC samples. We go to the root of the project, they have a bunch of them here, right? So that's the same project where I found the WPF example. So going to the Xamarin Forms client, as I was looking through this, I kind of went through all of the projects. I took a look at all of them. And the primary thing is this core project. Again, as I said, it's the root library. These two files don't really have anything. XAML file is the markup, and .cs is the code behind. So here pretty much I'm just going to go ahead and copy the first two lines, which is the OIDC client, login result, and the API client. So let's go ahead, open this up. Let's go into the code behind, and we're just going to start copy pasting this stuff in. Okay, and we're going to be resolving the imports straight away. We're going to install identity model OIDC client. If you don't know which one to pick between Thinkture or identity model OIDC client, you can always go back to the code and check the imports that they're using, and they're using identity model OIDC client. You can go ahead and pick that one. Okay, then let's go ahead and import the HTTP client as well. Okay, so once we got that, let's grab the rest of the stuff. They have these events basically that they bind to the buttons. I don't like that way. I'm just going to create the button and then put the function on there straight away. The next thing is the browser. So they get it from a dependency service. So this is some kind of dependency injection mechanism. I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this stuff and put it after the initialized component here. Okay, so one thing, I will just go ahead and comment out the API client, because primarily when you are setting up a new site, first thing that you want to do is connect to your identity server, right? And then the second thing is calling the API. So let's get the iBrowser in here as well. This is part of the OIDC client library that we have downloaded. And the first thing here is the configuration. So this configuration looks pretty much exactly the same as the other configurations we have. So this is where we essentially want to configure the connection to our identity server. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the MVC client, startup, and we're just going to copy this server, or rather the location. We're going to paste it into here. Okay, so that's the connection. Next is the client ID. Let's say Xamarin. We're gonna copy this, and I'm gonna drop down the MVC client. I'm gonna go into the identity server. I'm gonna go into the configuration. I'm going to scroll the way down, all the way down to where I have my WPF. I'm gonna paste Xamarin in here. I'm gonna copy the client. I'm gonna put a comma. After the Xamarin, I'm gonna paste my client. I'm gonna copy the client again, and it looks like I missed out an N. So Xamarin, fix this here, and Xamarin, put the N here as well. Delete these extra spaces because we don't need them. Now for the redirect URI, we can essentially go through this one by one, right? Then the scopes. So the scopes, I'm just gonna grab the same scopes that we define here. So it's OpenID and API 1. So profile, email, API, offline access. Offline access is for your refresh token. So API 1, go ahead and just add that. Redirect URI. This is something that is defined here, and this is the Xamarin Forms client is just a way to say that this is a URL for this application, and this is one of my assumptions. Okay, so we're gonna grab this, and we're just gonna put it as the redirect URI here. Okay, and the course origin, I don't think we need this, so I just go ahead and flat out delete it. So same, we're just going to be using code grant with PKC. No client secret is required because it's a public client. Your application can get reverse engineered to extract the secret, so there is no need to have a secret on not a secret on a public client. All right. Allow access tokens via browser. Yes, a browser is how we're going to be using. If your user agent, and the user agent is pretty much the browser or the native application, or a native application on the PC has access to a browser, you want to be getting it through a browser unless you have a back channel. And require consent again. Don't need that. That's on the identity server side. So close these startups. Next thing is the browser. We get it from the dependency injection. We'll get to that in a second. And response mode is redirect. That's fine. And then we pass these options into the client. Go back to the code, and we're going to have the login click. Let's go ahead, copy this function. I'm just going to go ahead and call it login instead of login clicked. I'm going to remove wherever it has the output text bit, because we can use the debugger to take a look at it. Plus, we want to just remove all the little bits and bobs that get in the way, essentially. Okay, and then the next bit is the authorization header. So this is where we'll just go ahead and assign the bearer token as the default authorization header to our API client. Again, this is kind of going to be an after part once we do connect to our identity server, so we can go ahead and comment this bit out just yet, just so we don't have to think about it. Okay, and I'm gonna put a breakpoint here. So next thing is I have this function. I want to be able to hit it from my application. So I'm gonna go into main page XAML, and hopefully the editor is gonna start up for me. Okay, so here it is. I'm gonna go ahead and delete whatever is in this stack layout. I'm gonna open the toolbox. If you don't have the toolbox, so you can go ahead, type it in here, and you will be able to grab it. You can search for it. Go ahead, grab the button, put it in here. We're gonna say login here, and we are going to say clicked, and we're gonna use the login function here. Okay, so once we click on this, this function is gonna get triggered. Fine. So a few things. We can't just go in and do this because we need the browser. So, and the browser, once looking through this code, we're gonna go into the Android part. You essentially find it after a way through the way of looking for it, right? And here you can see that it's being registered through dependency service. Again, I don't know anything about Xamarin dependency injection, but yeah, this is how you register your dependency. And yeah, looking through the code again, you can find the Chrome custom tab browser. It will have this OIDC callback activity, which is again another class here, and you can see that it says that data skim Xamarin and informs client, and this is the redirect URI here. Again, I'm not a Xamarin person, so change this to whatever you feel like you need to regarding your application. I'm pretty sure if it would be an Instagram application, you would put Instagram here or something like that. I'm just gonna keep it as the default because I don't really know what I'm doing. So we need to get this browser set up to work in our Android side of the application. Okay, and that's where, if you have an iOS app, it might have an interface to work with Safari. for Android, it's going to be an interface to work with the Chrome browser. Okay, so we're going to go into Android. We're going to go into the main activity, and there's a little bit more stuff in our main activity than there is in theirs. Not to fret though. There are a couple of things. I'll just run into some errors on purpose, and I'm just gonna state what solutions I found, and then maybe it will give you an idea of where you need to take your app, or you might know other ways to solve these problems because you might have more Xamarin expertise than me. So dependency service, let's go ahead, copy this, and we're just gonna put this again above the tab layout and toolbar. We're gonna inject dependency service and custom crop tabs. We can just create the class in a new file over here. Okay, another thing, I'm just gonna fix this error right now because it was really annoying, but this cross current activity current.init where we add the bundle, don't forget to grab this line as well, because I'll restate this error in a second. We're gonna go into Chrome custom tabs. We're gonna go back here and we're gonna go into Chrome custom tabs browser. We're going to go ahead and copy the whole browser, and you can see that it's deriving from the iBrowser interface, which comes from our OpenID Connect library, right? So let's paste it into here. We can also grab all of the packages that they have up here. Let's go ahead and paste them here. Delete the space at tabs. Delete all the stuff that is erroring right now. We can probably import it later, right? So different namespace for the custom tabs activity manager, and then this cross current activity. It's a package of plugin current activity, so we have to install that. Okay, so once that is installed, this cross current activity thing, okay, this is the bit, this connects to this bit here. So the problem that I found is if you don't have this initialized here, what's going to happen is this constructor is going to get called, and it will want, what I understand is, as the context of the activity, it will be null once you get to this part here of launching the URL, and then you're gonna get a Java null pointer exception, which was quite hard to diagnose, so I don't want you to be in the same situation. Make sure you include this cross-current activity, and if you have a null pointer, if your context is null, you can again have an idea of how to solve it in a different way. You know what you're doing, but other than that, include this, and your context shouldn't be null. OIDC callback activity. Let's go ahead and generate class in a new file. Whatever this error is, we'll close it. So references, I'm gonna close this. OIDC callback activity. Here's the new class. Again, we're gonna grab it from the source code here. Go ahead, copy all of this. Replace the OIDC client here, and we're going to grab all the imports as well. Anything that's missing, we can go ahead and add it. Okay, so everything compiles all right. Again, as I said before, once you get redirected back from your identity server, this is the thing that you're going to hit, and this is what's going to restart your application. So you're going to be in the browser, and then you're going to get back to your application. Okay. So this all seems fine. I'm just going to go ahead and close all of that. This seems fine as well. Another thing that I found is in the main activity, whatever this launch mode single task is, it's going to affect how our API client behaves between functions. So again, I'm just going to touch on that briefly, and we're actually going to run into that error so you can see what it does. I'm not an Android or a Xamarin developer. I don't exactly know what that attribute does. Okay, but as a checklist, we've set up the browser and the callback on our Android side, and we have configured our OIDC client. So let's go ahead and launch our identity server. So for this, I'm going to quickly look in my launch settings. So I'm going to launch my identity server on localhost 5001 and 5000. So what I'm actually going to do is change the port to 5001. What I want to achieve is essentially I just want my identity server running, and so I can debug the Xamarin application without interrupting my identity server. Okay. So going into page XAML, this port, I'm just going to replace it with 5001. I'm going to alt space on identity server to open up my terminal here, and I'm just going to do .NET run. Okay, and here you can see that it's running. So let's close the identity server. Let's close everything else as well. We'll keep, actually, let's close that as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the project that I want to start to Xamarin App Android. And again, this is assuming you have your devices set up and everything. I'm just going to go ahead and launch it. Okay, so here we have our application. We have the login button. So let's go ahead and encounter our first error by clicking on this. Okay. So error loading discovery document, error connecting to localhost 5000. So it's having trouble to get our discovery document. It's failed to connect to localhost /127, and this is your local IP address, and 5001. So the problem that as I understand it here, is essentially the Android emulator has its own local host. So the local host on our computer and in the emulated environment, they're essentially colliding. So the way I solve this problem is essentially normalizing the IP level. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the command prompt, and we're going to type in ipconfig, and we're going to grab the IPv4 address mask. Okay, and we're going to just go ahead, copy this IP. We're going to go into launch settings, and we're going to replace the local host with this IP. And with this, we will need to restart our identity server. So once we have changed that, what we'll have to do is we will have to go into the main page xaml.cs, and we'll have to change the IP here as well. Okay, so once that's done, let's go ahead and close this, and we are going to restart our identity server. So Control-C to stop, and up enter to bring the previous command and start it again. So once that's started, let's go ahead and launch our application again. Okay, so here we are again. Let's go ahead, click the login again, and let's bring on the next error. So error loading discovery. So again, we can't get the discovery document from this AP this time. Java security.cert path validation exception trust anchor for certificate path not found. So this error is not too scary if you understand the world of certificates and how they work. Essentially, what we have is this address here. If I grab it and I just put it into my browser, you can see that it's a unsecured page. So what's happening is, usually when you're developing on localhost, you have a development certificate, and the certificate authority lives on your computer in the certificate store manager, right? So you can manage your user certificates, your system certificates, and you have trusted root certificate authorities. Root certificate authorities are are certificates themselves, but these certificates are used to generate other certificates. So what will happen is the certificate that is protecting your website will come from a certificate authority. And if that certificate authority is installed on your device, that means that certificate is trusted and it comes from a trusted authority. The certificate authority used to sign our localhost development isn't used to sign the IP address that we're using now, okay? And not even that, it's the fact that this certificate authority is registered for the localhost domain. So even if we try to install that certificate authority for the localhost bit on our Android device, it won't be able to be installed because it's not for the same domain that it's registered, okay? So I had a hard time to try to fix this problem by installing the certificate authority on my Android device to get around this issue. I then gave up. If I do find a way to do this in the future, I will make a video about it. But this is a development environment, so it's okay to go for HTTP, and this is what we're going to do, okay? So let's go ahead back here, and what we're going to do, we're going to go into main page xaml.cs, and we're going to go to HTTP, and just to avoid another cycle of error, I'm just going to tell you straight away that in options, policy, discovery, HTTPS, require HTTPS, you have to set a false flag. Otherwise, it wants you to use HTTPS by default. So we're just going to set that to false, and we're going to say, right, man, using HTTP is fine. And again, if you're a Xamarin developer and you know what you're doing, you could probably check the environment of your application and set this to true when you're in production, right? Or use compiler tags, which probably, because otherwise, when if your application gets reverse engineered, they could probably hook into that environment function and set your application as debuggable, okay? And basically see all the logging that you have, etc. So you want to probably use compile time checking. So we require HTTPS false. We are going to have to change the port as well, because if we look in the identity server, we have 5001 for our HTTPS, we have 5000 for HTTP. So we're gonna actually just change the 0 on the end here, okay? So let's start this again. By the way, if you're noticed, I don't know how hot reload works here. It doesn't work out the box, so I couldn't be bothered to figure out how it actually works and enable it. So, not a 5-star experience. I'm gonna click login again, and the next thing, okay. So this time we get an error again. We still can't get the discovery document, and the error is clear text HTTP traffic to blah 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 is not permitted. So at this point, you just need to find the correct solution to this problem. So the first part of the error relates to the identity server, and then the clear text HTTP traffic seems like more of an environment sort of thing. And by environment, I mean the Android device. So we're just gonna go ahead, copy the error, and we can actually probably copy with the rest of our IP address and stuff like that. And again, use a search engine of your choice. Search for this. As you can see, I clicked on a couple of things here. You open these up and you take a look at what they're saying. So this first one, because I recognize it now, pretty much has the solution, and the guy describes a bunch of options that you can have. Again, I'm not an Android developer, so for me it was just wiring this up. This is something that you should be familiar with if you're an Android developer. I couldn't go with option 1 because that says go back to HTTPS, and I can't go back there. Next thing is basically setting some settings on your Android device. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this path. I'm going to go back to my development environment. I'm going to stop the application. And this is basically has to do with the Android manifest, which lives in your properties here. So we will go into resources. I'm going to shift F2 and I'm going to use the add new file extension. I'm just going to paste in the URL here, press enter. I'm going to get a folder with the XAML file here. I'm just going to go ahead, copy the contents that he's saying here. I guess that's, again, probably just some kind of Android configuration. We have to put our domain here. So we're going to go ahead, grab our IP address, put this in this field here. Okay, save it, close that. And now we want to go to our Android manifest, and we want to grab this bit, and notice that it's an attribute, right? So it doesn't live in the body, it lives as an attribute. So I don't know what kind of significance that has, but we are gonna go into XAML, format this a little bit, or try to, and there we go, right? So put it as a new line, no formatting for XAML for me. But yeah, and this basically just has reference to this network security file. So once that's done, again, we're trying to solve the issue of sending clear text over the wire. Okay, so let's go ahead and start this again and see if this fixes it. Okay, so here we are again. Let's go ahead, click on the login button with any luck. All right, so the browser opens and we see our login screen. Let's go ahead and type in Bob and password for our credentials, and we're going to click sign in. And hopefully I didn't forget the breakpoint. Nope. Okay. So here's the breakpoint. Here's the result. Error is false. So this must have been successful. Here we can see the access token and we have the identity token. So at this point we can connect to our identity server and we can retrieve the access token and the ID token. Again, identity token is for authenticating. So it's your user related information on your client. Access token is to be able to access specific things on the API. Okay, and the claims there, or the scopes that you have requested, are going to determine what parts of the API you can access, right? A little bit of a refresher on auth spec, right? So we get all the information that we need to essentially call an API, which is an access token. So we can go ahead and bring in our API. I'm going to be using API 1. This is the scope that we request here. So what I want to do before spinning up my API 1 is I want to level the address range, because it was on localhost and we already had that problem with not being able to reach localhost. So we want to put it on the same IPv4 mask, right? And this is just side effect of working with the Android device. One thing that you can try to do is use the Android proxy of 10.0.2.2 address. But the problem with that is that your identity server lives on localhost and you're specifying your authority for the client as 10.0.2.2, but your API points to local. So API thinks the authority is localhost, but the client gets a token from 10.0.2.2. So there is a misalignment there and you're going to get rejected by the API because this is not the same authority that I've registered, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this IP address and we're going to do the same thing for API 1. We're going to go into properties, launch settings. We're going to go ahead, change this, and notice the ports are the same for the API 1 as they are for the identity server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increment this to 2 and 3, okay? And I think this should be even. Actually, no, we want to go to startup and we want to do the same thing here. We want to point our API 1 to identity server, okay? We're going to change this to 5000. We're going to remove the HTTP and we're going to go into config. We're going to grab something relating to require HTTP metadata, HTTPS metadata, and we're going to set to false. And again, use your web hosting environment to set this to true when you are in development. Don't forget about that one. You want your apps to communicate over HTTPS when you're in production, okay? So that seems set. Let's go ahead and close this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press Alt-Enter here, go into the directory on my command line, and go ahead and say .NET run. If you don't know what this extension is, it's in extensions. We'll go extensions 2. And it is, if I go to installed, it is the open command line, and the way I create files is add new files. So go ahead, extensions. I have a Visual Studio 2019 setup. Go watch that. Really good video. But yeah, launch settings. Let's go ahead and make sure both of our servers are running. What we want to do is now go back to the browser, and we will go ahead and grab the API calls that it's making, right? So we're gonna go into Xamarin Forms client 4, and we're gonna go into main page XAML CS. We're gonna grab the call API function, and we're gonna put it at the bottom here. I'm gonna remove some spaces first. I'm gonna remove the clicked part, so it's just gonna be call API. This part here, whatever it's trying to do to output text, I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to put a breakpoint on the curly bracket here at the end so we can see the result. And get async, what I'm actually going to replace it with is get string async, because we have a string response from our API, and that's all I want to see. So if I go into the secret controller, I can see it's just a string, and we're just going to the route of /secret, right? So that's what I want to put here, just secret. All right, and then we should see whatever response it is, a secret message from API 1. Okay, let's go ahead and comment the binding of the access token. So we're just setting the default authorization header. And let's go ahead and comment this address here. So remember that we changed the address at which API 1 is hosted. So we want to just go ahead and grab this, paste this here, and we're going to change this to 2, right? So again, you can verify this when you launch your API 1. You have the HTTP address here, so yeah, just go ahead and copy that if you're struggling with finding it. So we have the function to call the API. We actually need a button now, so let's go ahead to main page XAML. I'm gonna go ahead, copy the button, and I'm going to call this call API. And on clicked, I want to action the call API function. Okay. Just gonna wait for this to load to confirm my button is present there. Seems like this is never going to load, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy that and trust the demo gods, right? So we're going to run into an error first, and I just want you to see this, right? So we're going to put a breakpoint here, and we're going to know why this error occurs, okay? And this is something that I mentioned when we were copying stuff for our Android application, okay? This has to do with like running on one thread or whatever. So let's log in. And as you can see, our state is already saved from the previous login. So this is the single sign-on happening. We have to sign in first at one time. And now if we log in again, we just get taken. Okay. So result is not error, and we're gonna go ahead and assign the authorization token. So I'm gonna sit on this breakpoint here at the end, and what I want to do is I want to look at the value. By the way, this is using lazy, so this only gets instantiated once. But again, I'm not exactly sure how this works in the Android in the Xamarin application, right? So let's take a look at the value. We're gonna take a look at default request headers, and we're gonna see that the authorization header is here. Okay, we can see our access token. So we're gonna leave this now, and we're gonna call the API. So before calling, again, we're gonna take a look at the value. We're gonna take a look at the default request headers, and we're gonna see that the authorization header is null, right? And this troubled me for like an hour or two. I could figure out what it was. And what's gonna happen? I'm gonna press F5 on status code that does not in 4001. It's unauthorized. Okay, so at least authorization is working. But what is wrong? How come? Let's go ahead and this, right? How come the request header that we assigned here has been dropped here? And if I go back to their example code, it is in the Android application main activity. It is whatever this launch mode single task option does. Again, I have no clue what it is. I'm not an Android developer. I think there's some good documentation around this. As I've tried to research it a little bit, I saw a big block of text from Google, and I was like, I am not reading that. So yeah, let's go to here in our main activity CS in our Android application. So this file right here, and this is not nicely formatted, so I'll just go ahead and put this on the end here. I think this namespace is needed here, so I'll delete this. So yeah, it goes inside the parentheses activity. So I guess this is some kind of definition for this activity, and this is the main activity. So single task. I don't know. I guess kind of makes sense what it does. We have a single thread rendering the UI. Could be that kind of thing. I don't know. I'm gonna close that, and again, we're just gonna go through it again. Is coming up to the end, to the finale. Okay, so here we are. Again, I'm gonna click the login button. We're gonna get taken through this rather quickly. There we go, the result. We're gonna get the assignment on our header there. Let's go ahead and call the API, and this time take a look at the value. We don't get the error, by the way, and the default request header, look, the authorization header is there, and if we take a look at the parameter, we do have our access token there, and the result is secret message from API 1. Okay, so we've essentially connected to the identity server, and we have managed to call our API. There is a question around how do you get refresh tokens. I've taught that stuff in my previous videos, so offline access scope and authorization code flow that we're going to be using is going to be returned in the result here. Next question is maybe around state. How do I store my access token to persist throughout my application? I'm going to say I don't know because I am not a Xamarin developer. Again, please don't ask me in the comments how to do Xamarin. I literally don't know. Assuming maybe there is some kind of state management built in or something like that, or use global variables. So I don't know what to do around that. Silent refreshing. Maybe you can use the refresh token. If you cannot use the refresh token, I guess you can use silent refreshing. I don't know if it's advised or not, but I guess it would work around the same as this login process. But what you would do is you would spawn a headless version of the browser, so it would not actually pop up as a window, it would be spawned and as the background. So you want to Google for a headless browser, and I guess it's going to be the same for a WPF application. Okay, but nevertheless, this will be it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section. If they're only relating to identity server and authentication, if they're related to if they're Xamarin specific, please don't ask me. I don't know anything about Xamarin. If you do know about Xamarin or these problems that I have assumed in this video, please do leave descriptions and knowledge bombs for other users so they can go and read that. Don't forget to join my Discord server, and I also stream on Wednesdays and Sundays on Twitch, so make sure to join for that. And as always, hope I'll see you in my other videos.